Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Wednesday, November 9th, and it's kind of an exciting time for the Cubs. I mean, the most exciting it's been with the most optimism that there's been in a long time. Just free agency starts tomorrow, so it's kind of like the world is our oyster. The Cubs have a very strong minor league system. They've got some pretty good pieces in place in Chicago. A lot of questions there that we'll address here in the show, but definitely a lot of reasons to be very optimistic heading into tomorrow. Let's hope we feel the same level of optimism or more heading into spring training.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It feels like there's been a lot of tempered expectations lately with some of the reports coming out about, Jesse Rogers is out there with one of them. I think, we saw some stuff from Sahadev Sharma and Patrick Mooney where, hey, you might want to pump the brakes a little bit on the whole shortstop pursuit thing. That intelligent spending deal is like, yeah, if one of these guys falls to them, but the Cubs don't want to go to the 8 years it's going to take to land one of these guys. So again, I think it's interesting. Now, part of that is because, you're getting the reports, you're hearing from Jed Hoyer, who is notoriously veiled, I guess, in a different way from what Theo Epstein was in terms of what he wants to do. And so I think some of that is we've heard them connected for so long. It's a very interesting thing to me that all of a sudden we're kind of hearing this. It sounds like a concerted effort on the part of the Cubs anyway. Correa's getting more than 5 years. But it sounds like something that they're kind of putting out there. And I don't know how much of that is setting expectations. I don't know how much of it is just smoke. It's very difficult to tell, but I do believe, and have for a while, that they're going to go aggressively after a couple of mid-range type targets, whether that be Kodai Senga or Jose Abreu, that they would want to lock some of these guys down earlier who aren't going to require the huge money to sort of set that stage a little bit better for maybe what that allows them to do. I certainly don't think they're going out of the gate and trying to go, here you go, Carlos, we'll give you 8 years and $300 million or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that approach would be basically the same playbook they brought into play last year, right? I mean, the identical playbook, really, to be honest. I mean, where they signed Suzuki and Marcus Stroman.
They got Stroman right at the end. Although, and we heard the talk, it's like they wanted to go like 7 years on Correa, but I also don't think that they were doing that. I don't think they went as much with the intention. They certainly didn't say as much. Like, I still think they want to try to be competitive. I have a very, very hard time believing if they're not seriously in the negotiations with one of those top hitters, right? You say we need to add, Hoyer has said that we need to add a lot of power to the lineup. We need to be able to blow teams out. We need to be able to beat them. Oh God, no, Brad Chafin. Oh, stop it. Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the Andrew Chafin. Brad Chafin's the guy I went to school with. I shouldn't look at the comments. It's bad enough to do, but
Evan reacts to the comments. For the people on the podcast, Evan is looking at the comments because we
No, they should not get Chafin at like $7 or $8 million a year, who's like a mediocre reliever at this point. He's cool. He's a neat guy, I guess. But anyway, if they don't go after one of those big hitters, I know they have some guys coming up. Matt Mervis, right? I think, my belief in him is not a secret, but I'm just having a really hard time. If they don't go after one of the top pitchers, and that's the thing that Jesse Rogers reported, like, they're not in on DeGrom or Verlander or Rodon. And he said he'd be surprised if one of the shortstops fell to him. Now, again, some of that is he's got kind of a shtick that he goes with, right? And I get that. But we're hearing it from some other people as well. So I just, if you don't get one of those at least one of those top guys, I just don't see it. I don't get it.
Yeah. It feels like the Cubs, like, if they don't do anything, like, have they convinced themselves? Because, in the second half of last year, they were 39-31, a .557 winning percentage, which is good, right? It's good enough to probably get you into the playoffs with the expanded version they're going with now. And so do you think there's a world where the Cubs brass has actually convinced themselves that they don't need to add that much more because they've got basically what they need to win based off of what they saw in the second half, even though we all know their offense just isn't going to play. If that offense, if you had a similar offense heading into the playoffs, you would get swept probably in the first series because the pitching is so superior once you get to the playoffs that you've got to have some offense.
If the front office believes that, they're idiots.
Yeah.
That's pure and simple. I mean, that would be the dumbest thing. And I forget what it was like. And somebody had mentioned it, that they thought, well, they wouldn't go big this offseason because there are too many holes to fill. Okay, that super dumb. All right, I've got a leak in my roof. I've got a couple of leaks in my roof. So rather than patch those leaks, I'm just going to wait until the whole thing collapses in on my home, and then I'll fix the roof. Well, that's stupid.
Yeah, but so let's say they don't go out and get, one of the shortstops, which feels like is kind of a must do if they're really going to be serious about competing, adding power there to the infield. And then if they find themselves in a position where they're, close to first in the NL Central at the All-Star break or near the trade deadline. And then you don't want to be in the position where you're having to go and trade the guys in your farm system, and probably not get the same value that you would otherwise because you need to upgrade before the trade deadline. So that's my biggest fear is that they find themselves in that position where they're competitive and then they have to trade away guys where right now they have the ability to address that with dollars.
Yeah, and that's the thing and they've said the whole time, and we've seen. I mean, the payroll is dropping off again. It's dropped off significantly over the last several years. It's dropping off again, and it'll drop much further after this coming year, the next year, whatever we want to say. Right? It continues to drop, so they can add meaningfully this winter and still add meaningfully again. And I know what people talk about. I know what Hoyer said. And you want to wait for the prospects to mature or whatever, but. A, they're not all going to work out. And B, as you mentioned, if you're going to have to trade, and you have to trade, good teams bring on better players. You have to trade from your farm system eventually. That's the reality of it. Well, the best way to know the right trades to make is to go out there and ensure that you have players locked into spots at the major league level. So now hey, shortstop and third or short and second or whatever, those are locked down. Now we know if we've got the next shortstop who's kind of in line to come up and we don't really have another spot for him, well, he now becomes a trade piece that we can. That's how Gleyber Torres worked, right? Because they knew they wouldn't have a spot for him for the next several years in Chicago. So they're able to go out and make that move because of it.
Little did they know.
Yeah. And boy, two of the people involved in that whole thing ended up being just tremendous assholes. But it's those are the kind of things they have to be able to, you can buy certainty, right? What do we want? A degree of certainty, right? Not 100. You can never buy 100%, but spending money allows you to purchase greater certainty than simply waiting on a prospect to mature and develop, right? And you can always then, if you have somebody in a spot and you got this prospect you really love, you can figure out a way to move pieces around and make that work. I am concerned, and hell, and maybe it's Bogaerts. Maybe Bogaerts ends up. The last projection was he'd only be getting like 6 years and $168 million. Well, that's 2 years less and $100 million less than some of the projections for Turner and Correa. And Turner apparently wants to stay East Coast anyway, so I don't know that that's even an option.
I don't see Turner. I mean, I think Turner would be a good fit, but like a long-term contract for him, he's aging. I don't like Turner.
The speed goes away a little earlier,
especially in a long-term 3-year deal. That'd be great. 5 years, maybe.
Which isn't going to happen, right? But I would say, like, hey, if you can get, again, Bogart's a little bit older, but if you're only talking 6 years, that's a much different the difference between 6 and 8, you're lopping off those last 2 years, and it's actually the projection from Kylie McDaniel at ESPN. Like I said, it's $100 million less overall, so the AAV was even lower than those other guys. Like everything was lower, which was kind of surprising to me, but. I do think after last year and like watching what the Rangers did with Seager and Simeon, like I don't think we see something like that again. I mean, Seager got that monster deal for $325. I don't think Correa's. I mean, maybe he ends up getting. I don't think he gets 10. I seriously doubt he gets 10. Like some of that may come down. And that's where I wonder to what extent, right? And maybe this is like we take it at face value and the Cubs are seriously not interested in that. But I also wonder that they have been so heavily implicated because you see all these things, whether it's Heyman, you heard John Morosi saying we're going to be hearing about Correa and the Cubs for weeks to come yet. You've got Jim Bowden. You've got all these people connecting the Cubs to some of these guys, several of them in many cases.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that was them kind of now wanting to back off of that a little bit in order to not to say they're not going to bid, not to say they're not going to be involved in it, but to maybe slow down the idea of this really early bidding war on this, because we know this stuff's going to drag out for a while. This is not like these guys are all going to start signing contracts tomorrow or on Friday, or even the weekend. I would, maybe some of them in December, but this will go for a while. So I think a lot of this is a message that the Cubs want to have out there, which I get to an extent. But on the other hand, if you're going, we're going to spend, and I know they talked intelligent, but we're going to be competitive. We want to do all this stuff. Boy, it would feel really, really hollow if they go back out and only get the kind of deals, like whether it be for Senga and Abreu, which would be very similar to what they did with Stroman and Suzuki. If you do a couple more of those kind of mid-level-ish deals and then some ancillary stuff around there, that you're unserious about really competing, right?
It's not clear what you're trying to do at that point, right? Because it's like, I mean, if you look at the guys who are kind of on the verge from the minor league system, you've got some pitchers down there, so that's fine. But when you start talking about power bats, I mean, you're limited, right? You got Mervis and Davis pretty much. Canario looked like he was going to come up, but obviously he's out for probably all of next season, or probably not going to be in Chicago next season.
At least for where the Cubs are concerned, certainly.
Yeah. And so from a power perspective, you've got to go out and acquire power. I mean, it's obvious there is no power. And if you've got Ian Happ, who's not re-signed or extended, falling off after next year, you're losing Wilson Contreras. So there's a power bat. I wouldn't even call Contreras a power bat, but he had more power in the Cubs lineup. He was a power bat because they have no power.
Yeah.
And so they literally have to go out and get power if they're serious about competing.
Yeah. They have to. And I mean, and Jed Hoyer has said as much. And that's the bothersome part, is like, you can't say we're going to spend from our resources, and you can't say we need to add power and then go out and not spend from your resources and not add power.
Wisdom is not getting it done.
Right. You can't.
Frank Schwindel not getting it done.
Those things don't work together. And if, again, it can be, you don't have to go get, right, DeGrom and Correa and somebody else, but Senga and Abreu is not getting it done. The other thing that would be weird is, like, to me, and we've heard multiple times again from Bruce Levine. We also, Jesse Rogers said that the White Sox are moving Andrew Vaughn over to first base, which again is another sign that they're not either willing or able to bring Abreu back. But getting a 2-year deal on an aging veteran like that, now again, we could argue that, like, oh, it's a move to put butts in seats because people know the guy because he's from Chicago, he played for the White Sox. But, like, Jose Abreu is not somebody who increases season ticket sales on his own, right? And so that is a move. If they were to make it, Rizzo's not coming back. Rizzo's not coming back. We'll talk. I'll address that after this. You don't go and sign Jose Abreu for 2 years if you don't plan to compete. Now, I could have said the same thing about Stroman. I thought that was sort of the case. That is another signal that you've got a guy who you feel like kind of rounds out your lineup, kind of helps bring along your first baseman of the future, that sort of thing. So here's the deal with Rizzo. Rizzo is never coming back to the Cubs, period. Now, I suppose I could end up eating my words, but this is, I'm not just making this up, right? I have this on fairly good authority. There were bridges burned there. Rizzo was the most vocal of the guys who left last year, who definitely, and Rizzo has had words kind of publicly about and toward the front office anyway. He wasn't happy with the way things went down. And now he has a qualifying offer. Here's the thing. So even if we set aside pride and ego and all that stuff, there's no way the Cubs go out and sign for a dude they used to have, who they know he's got some back issues, who no longer has who wouldn't have the short porch at Yankee Stadium to aid those home run numbers, for a 2 or 3 year contract that he's going to want to get, right? When they're also going to have to give up a draft pick and international pool money because he's got a qualifying offer. There's no way.
that's not happening.
It doesn't make any sense at all. And for Rizzo's market, it doesn't make sense for him to come to Chicago because he's not going to get as much now from another team as what he would get from the Yankees. So the Rizzo thing was not going to happen
Chicago
anyway.
Sees Rizzo is if Rizzo's like 38, 39 years old.
Yeah, or if for whatever reason the Yankees are like, no, this is it. We're not even going to negotiate with you. We're just giving you this 1 year, and literally no other team will give him anything. And the Cubs were like, here's $25 million for 2 years, right? And that was his last offer. But it's funny. Here's what I laugh about. Somebody was like, I saw this yesterday. Somebody's like, oh, that's pretty silly to opt out of $16 million when you're kind of an injured, 31-year-old. It's like, dude, he just got a qualifying offer. Like, he guaranteed himself at least $3.65 million more than he would have made. It was a very smart move on his part because he's guaranteed more money.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So he had a contract for next year at, was it 15?
16.
And so this guarantees him close to 20, right?
Yeah, 19.65.
Yeah. And so obviously, why wouldn't you do that?
And I think it, but I think it also guarantees
the Yankees want him there next year. So they just agreed to pay him more, really, at the end of the day. But do you think the Yankees are interested in negotiating a contract with him, or are they just, so you think they will negotiate a contract versus just keep him on the 1 year?
Yeah, I mean, because I think he wants to be there as well. This is kind of one of those procedural things again, right? Like his reported desire is to stay there in New York. With the QO attached, it almost assures that he's going to have to be there, right? Because I can't see another team wanting to forfeit those penalties and also giving him the money. I mean, there's projections all over the place. The one I saw was, Bowden, who, for everything I don't really care for his work, Jim Bowden at The Athletic, but he does a really good job with these salary projections and things like that. He had projected 3 years, $54 million, which, maybe a little on the high side.
Yeah,
right. If we look at it that way, because that would be what 18 a year. But and again, I don't know if this is coincidental or not, but Rizzo made $16 million with the Yankees this year. If they were to pay him 54, that's the same $70 million over 4 years that the Cubs had offered him, except it was over 5 years. So the salary figure being there, and if that's the case, then Rizzo absolutely won out. And I think, like we said on here before, here's the other thing. Whether or not the deal with the Cubs was legit and whether he would have taken it or what, like the last 2 years, the Cubs have been awful. He has been on a playoff team and a World Series favorite for a while. Obviously, that didn't work out, but at least he was playing on a competitive team over these last two, year and a half, last end of last season and then this past one. So, and
they haven't won anything.
They haven't, but would you rather be playing?
I mean, being in New York obviously is exciting.
Would you rather be playing there on a team that's winning 100 games, or would you rather be on a team that looked like it was going to lose 100 for most of them? So I think that's, if you're looking at trying to, if I have my best chance to win another championship, that's what I'm looking at too, in addition to the money. But I mean, I think he'll end up making out better in New York than he would anywhere else at this point. But he's not coming back.
He's 33 now. He's going to be 36 if he were to get a 3-year deal. Very hard to think. I mean, I would imagine that if he gets a 3-year deal, it's around $15 million a year. I'd be surprised if it was much more than that. Just because the fact.
Yeah, I can see it with like some incentives or something, right? You throw some incentives on the thing. Yeah. Maybe you throw in an option with a buyout or whatever to kick some of that money back down the road. That sort of thing.
It's going to have to be with New York, because it's like, it doesn't seem like you said, who's going to go out there and really pay for him? It's at this point. It's just hard to see, but you never know.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. But I think again, New York can probably give him more years again, because they don't have penalties, right? Yeah. They have the qualifying offer on him, so they can re-sign him. And again, I think he's gonna. I would say he ends up, like you said, 15, 16, maybe 17 million a year. He ends up doing 2 to 3 years, right? He'll and it'll make some sense for him and and whatever. And yeah, does he end up making a little bit less than what the Cubs? But this goes back to where I was talking about before and why he would not have come back anyway. And we kind of I won't relitigate this, but in his mind, the Cubs lowballed him. He was not pleased with the offer that they got, and so he was not willing to negotiate up to a certain point, right? So it's like, all right, hey, spring training's coming to a close. Nope, we're done. That you're not serious about meeting me where I want to be on my offer. We're done now. And so a lot of people looked at this and said, oh, look how the Cubs offer stacked up. I'm like, yeah, but if Rizzo had a season in 21 like he had, let's say, in 19, because he kind of sucked in 20, right? But if he got back to his old ways in 19, or even like he had this past year with a bunch of home runs, now all of a sudden that market is much greater for him at the end of that. The fact that he came on strong for the Yankees right there, actually like right at the beginning after the trade. He had that hot stretch where he's like knocking in an RBI in every single like 6 straight games or something. But, his performance hurt him. I think that's where we look back on it. But again, that's what he looked at that as if, this is a guy who screamed, respect me, a while back. And I think that's kind of what he felt toward the Cubs. And I don't think he felt that he was getting the proper respect. I don't believe that he was going to be an option for them regardless. Of a QO.
It was a weird situation too, because here you had a core of players who won the World Series, and then they just, it's just, and so it's like there was a sense that they didn't really want those. They wanted to reset things, and they have. Speaking of that, we did get good news on Brennen Davis the other day, close to 100%. So, we were really concerned with him being held out of the games in the AFL. We didn't find out what was going on until, several weeks after he left the game early, found out it was back tightness. And now we find out that he's close to 100%. So that is a huge relief. If you're the Cubs, if you're a fan, and if you want,
provided we can put trust in what they said, because Jared Banner also didn't say it was the back. He just said general soreness again, so he wasn't even forthright about what it was. So, but yeah, I
maybe
think
they don't want to. They're trying to quell the concern there, right?
Yeah, but I think as we had alluded, or had kind of speculated. So we speculated initially that it's probably a back tightness thing, and then I think shortly after our last show or 2 weeks ago was when Sahade came out and said that's what it was.
Yeah.
And and that it was probably a precautionary thing. 'Cause it's one of those like, hey man, if you take all that time off and then you try to jump back into it, and you're doing all this other stuff, it feels like one of those where like,
let the guy rest.
Hey, doc, like, hey, I'm feeling something here, and you tell a trainer, and they're like, okay, nope, you're done. Right, you're shut down.
Yeah,
you slept funny. You got a crick in your neck. Sorry, nope, no more play for you.
Yeah.
So,
let's
hope that's the issue anyway, because man, the Cubs have been snake bit with a lot of their injuries to guys.
He
really needs to step up.
And Miguel Amaya, there's word that he is coming back from I'm just going to call it a foot injury because it's like a technical term. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but he should be back for spring training. And then Ed Howard is probably to resume light baseball activities, which I imagine is just running around and playing catch after Thanksgiving. So that's, in like next week or something, 2 weeks, whatever. And so this is all good, man. This is lining up really interesting. Let me ask you just a random question off these guys, but PCA. Will PCA be in Mesa for spring training?
Well, he'll have to be. You mean, will he be with the big league club or?
Yeah.
I mean, he'll definitely be in Mesa because,
of course,
minor leaguers are down there too. But I think they'll have him in. I think they'll have him spend a lot of the time in Major League camp to try to just to be around those guys. I mean, he'll make some appearances in some games too. I don't think he'll be, because of all the 40-man stuff they'll have going on. But I think they'll have him hanging around those guys a lot more than maybe what a normal Double-A, because he should start the season at Double-A, right? Unless they're going to jump him all the way past Tennessee, which I doubt. I think they want to have him in Tennessee, seeing some of that pitching.
That would make sense.
Yeah,
there's no reason not to, because you can call him up straight from Tennessee too.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that makes sense. He'll be spending a lot of time, and and we've seen that with a lot of guys before, kind of those top prospects. They want them to be around the big league players, and and in that environment, seeing those guys prepare, and just even though again it's certainly different during spring, than it is when the guys can knock off after 3 innings and go play a round of golf, right? It's not quite this, but I think certainly working out with them, and part of that depends too on like who do they get to play center field, right? Because who the hell was Pete Crow Armstrong going to learn from last year? You're going to take Rafael Ortega out there to show him how to run routes? Hell no. It'd be the other way around. Like, hey, here's how we,
Some of the routes I saw PCA run, I do think that he doesn't need much help in that area. But
yeah, but if they were to bring somebody, if it's a Kevin Kiermaier, if they were to work a little trade with Michael A. Taylor, with the Royals, somebody like that who's been around, who has played elite level defense before, and who can just kind of go through some of that stuff. And maybe, again, I think Crow Armstrong is one of those rare talents who, his body control, right? We've talked about proprioception before, and kinesthetic feel is what he refers to it as the same thing, just kind of sliced into two different really big words. But it is such a like he's worked really, really hard at it. So I don't want to pretend like this is just some skill that he was born with that he has. But I do think he's got a better innate athleticism and a way to translate that athleticism onto the baseball field than what most have. Like kind of like an Andrew Jones, somebody like that who could play, and even Jim Edmonds if you want to go there. I know a lot of people probably don't want to give a former Cardinal, even though he was also a former Cubs great. The kind of guys who can they can play shallower than most because they know how to get those jumps, and they're able to kind of sacrifice their body on some of those dives and make those incredible plays. We've seen that with him, how much ground he can cover. And that's not just a matter. It is. I mean, you have to be fast to be able to do it, but you also have to have tremendous instincts and understand how to get your body through space when you're diving and jumping and all that kind of thing. So he's one of those guys I'm really, really looking forward. Although it does scare me a little bit because of the brick wall at Wrigley, and I just kind of wonder.
You don't want him running into that thing.
Yeah, I want that because he, Aaron Rowan style or whatever. But yeah, I'm really interested to see it, but I do kind of wonder. I think more for the probably just the hitting aspect of it too, right? If you get some of those professional guys in there, if you do kind of hopefully revamp that lineup a little bit and also get those veteran guys a little bit more familiar with him, right? Because eventually he is going to be up there and playing amongst them. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that plays.
So, I mean, as it stands right now, going into spring training, I think there's a lot to be excited about. If anybody has any thoughts of maybe going to spring training, if you've never been to spring training before, I would definitely say this is the year to get down there. I know it was very exciting, and when the Cubs were good, and obviously after the World Series was amazing. But so it's not like that. But there is going to be a lot to be excited about between minor league camp, which is going on at the same time as big league spring training. You're going to have the backfields. There's going to be baseball every single day that's going on down there with guys that are going to make it into the big leagues and probably have a big impact between the big league team and the minor league guys. And then you throw in the possibility and the likeliness that they end up signing whoever they end up signing. There's going to be a lot of excitement. And I know you're planning to come down. A bunch of people are planning to come down. The World Baseball Classic is going to be going on during the same time. I mean, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. March.
Yeah, that should be really. I really, really want to get to the WBC. I mean, that's the biggest thing, and I missed it the last time. If you recall, we went to the game at Sloan where the Cubs scrimmaged against Team Japan. I mean, it was an official-ish game, and that was when Shohei Ohtani was supposed to play, but he had sprained his ankle, rolled it or whatever, like the previous week, and didn't end up traveling to that game with them and playing with them. And so I was really disappointed because then it was kind of like. And that's when we saw some random dude named David Bodie hit a home run. Just, like, didn't have his name on there, wasn't even up on the screen. Like, who the hell's this guy? I mean, we figured it out later, of course. But yeah, I would love to get to some of those because and not even to go to a game that the U.S. is playing in. I'd love to go to like Puerto Rico and the Dominican and just be
I don't
in
know.
that environment.
Are they going to be down?
I'm
Do you
not
know
sure. I don't know
it's
who's
four
actually
teams
in it.
that are
Yeah.
going to be
So
here.
whatever it is, I'm sure there'll be
I
some
think Japan
crazy
is one of
excitement.
them. And if it's
Japan is playing
Japan,
in that one?
I want to say so. So if it's Japan, then obviously that could be very exciting.
Well, hey, you get
Otani
to
is playing,
Seiya.
right?
Is Otani playing for him too? I know Seiya is. Maybe
Let's see.
Senga?
I'm going to pull it up. Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess he conceptually should be signed by then. Okay, here we go. I'm looking right here. Oh no, it's Japan's actually playing in Japan. So it's the US, Canada, Mexico, and Colombia.
I
So
mean, it'll still be cool.
it'll still be
but
cool.
like that's not
Be
as
good.
Yeah, that's not nearly as fun as man, you watch some of those like the Caribbean nations and it just the vibe in that place would be so fun.
The place to be is Miami, dude. Puerto Rico,
Oh.
Venezuela, Israel, and Dominican Republic.
In
Miami.
How does Israel fit in that mix?
I don't know.
Come on over. That seems like Robert Stock is pitching for Team Israel, former Cubs reliever.
There you go.
He's been over in I think he's been in Korea, I think this last year. He and his wife just had a baby not too long ago, so that's cool. But no, I mean it's a fun stuff like that. It's just such a different deal, and I think what we've seen, like unlike the All-Star game, and I'm not saying guys don't care about the All-Star game, but it's still not. They still don't take it as seriously while also having like this is I think the highest level of fun plus competitiveness that you can find in something like this, like beyond even the Olympics and things like that. Like this is a big deal. And it's nice that it's also happening during spring training. It's not like they've got to try to take a break in the middle of a season or anything like that. Like it's happening at a time when, they're not playing quote unquote real games anyway. Yeah. So, and like if you look at that US team, man, like that's the key here. Just look at like basketball and some of the Olympics or world championships, and we've seen it in baseball too before where, it's like the Pro Bowl in football where, the first 5 guys like Mitchell Trubisky made the Pro Bowl because the first 6 quarterbacks who were voted into it couldn't go or didn't want to go. And so I think with this is like, no, like they want to play. They want to be a part of this. It's such a unique experience that they don't get to have very often, kind of like the World Cup is for soccer in a way. So that part's cool because these guys care, and that's what's really kind of neat. So and you probably see a lot of guys, some of those other squads that or maybe some up and comers that can make a name for themselves that might not otherwise have been on the radar, maybe because of limited MLB action or maybe none. So that's fun stuff. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be cool. And then we've got something that I wanted to touch on that you had touched on actually was a report about Matt Mervis and some comments that Carter Hawkins made, which really just reinforced what we've all been saying, all along, which is Matt Mervis really belongs in Chicago, arguably belonged in Chicago this season. But if there was ever any doubt, he's certainly proving that he belongs there in the AFL. There's nothing more he can do.
No,
I mean, if he doesn't start the season in Chicago, I don't want to say I'll be shocked because I think the Cubs are capable of doing things that just make no sense. But from just a complete logical perspective, he absolutely should be the first baseman on day one next season.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, and let's say they go out and sign somebody like a Jose Abreu, right? And the two kind of platoon a little bit, and Mervis spends more time at DH, right? While he's still, because I think that's part of it is as a two-way player. He was a pitcher at Duke. It's not as if he was in the field, and he DH'd a lot. There was one summer he had hurt his shoulder, so he DH'd the whole time and didn't play in the field. So he does have maybe a little bit more of a limited. He did some DH this year too, right? So maybe it takes a little while to keep working on some things over first base, but he should absolutely be on the roster. He should be an everyday player, whether it's DH or first base. And and I've seen a couple people out there one way or the other either question it, and it was funny. They'll be like, "Oh, next Micah Hoffpower." It's like, okay, let's dial that one back a little bit, right? There's all kinds of things we could look at, but I think that so many times people don't truly understand. They'll look at obviously hey, started calling him Mash Mervis. That's what they look at. They see the home runs. They see the RBI totals. But you're looking at a guy who's, I think his walk rate at South Bend was like 6% somewhere. And they were 4% maybe. And then it jumped to like 8 something at AA. And then it jumped to 10 something at AAA. And at the same time, his strikeout rates went down and down and down. At the Arizona Fall League, 61 plate appearances. He struck out 6 times and hit 6 home runs. So, I mean,
that's ridiculous.
That doesn't happen, right? And this is, and the thing is too, this is not part of, this isn't some random, like a lot of these guys, people will talk about, it'll be some dude who was like nothing, then busted out of nowhere that no one expected. And you could say that about Mervis, but realistically, he was the first person as soon as the draft ended, within a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, the Cubs were on the phone to him, right? The Yankees wanted him too. They saw some of this stuff in him. They worked specifically through it. A lot of what he had to change was mental in terms of how he's approaching his at-bats. So, when people or some people say, oh, he's moved pretty quickly from single A all the way up. He needs more experience. Like, no, he doesn't. We saw how he destroyed AA pitching. We saw how he destroyed AAA pitching. And now we've seen what he's done now. Are there some things he's going to have to fight through and learn from? Yeah, absolutely. But for a Cubs team that needs power, that needs left-handed power, and if you look at their totals from their first baseman, from all first basemen overall, I think they had like an 86 or an 87 WRC plus. I think it was 86 and negative 0.6 WAR that they got from first base last year. So a literal replacement level player would be significantly better than what they were able to get from their combination of players who were at first, because they patchworked the hell out of that, right? So like, even if he doesn't come up and immediately win Rookie of the Year, right? All he's got to do is like just not suck. Go out there and hit 20 bombs, bat 260,
which seems inevitable.
Yeah, I think he can be.
I'm looking for like a 30 to 40 home run level.
I think he's capable of doing that. And the thing is, I think, and there's a difference between I think he believes he's capable of doing that. Now, whether he would come right out and say, yeah, I think I will or can hit 40 home runs in the majors, I don't think he would be so bold as to come out that far. But this is the exact same thing Carter Hawkins said. It's something that we've heard from Mervis. It's something we've heard from Justin Stone. Mervis himself is not surprised by the success. I think, he did not set for himself like, oh, I want to hit, 37 homers, 36 homers, and then 6 more in the AFL and have 42 homers, 130 RBI and bat 297 or whatever. But I think he knew that he had the capability of being this kind of a player. And you could see it. There are certain guys that you can just look at, they get it. And he's one of them. And so, yeah, I very much look forward to it. And for them to say, he's earned it, I think unless something goes drastically wrong, and I mean, hell, we've seen guys have bad spring trainings, and that means nothing for what you're going to do in the regular season.
Yeah.
Right. Or vice versa. We've seen guys.
Yeah. We had someone comment that Mervis, the only thing Mervis needs to do is show in spring training. I totally disagree with that. The spring training is meaningless. He doesn't need to show in spring training to get a spot on the Cubs. I think that's really doesn't have anything to do with it. The exciting thing about all of this is that we're going to be able to find out firsthand from Matt Mervis because he is coming on this show. And so just as long as you, Evan, have told him that it is a video show.
Yes.
Remember when we had
Len Casper.
Len Casper came on.
I was told this is a podcast. I was like, no, you weren't. but anyway.
And he thought it was a podcast. Like the moment we're getting ready to go on, obviously it was a video. And so, he went through with it and he was so cool about it and everything like that. That was during.
But I literally shared with him. I went back and I was like, man, did I screw this up? And I was like, no, it's like a live video show that we do. So anyway,
maybe Lynn was in a sensitive mood that morning or something. But Matt Mervis is going to be on the show in 2 weeks, November 23rd. So be sure to join us for that. That should be exciting.
Mark your calendars. We should maybe figure out a way to bring in. I mean, we got to curate them, but maybe we can get some questions even from some of our frequent listeners. Maybe there's a way we can kind of do that. Maybe I'll do something like in the days heading up to that. Yeah.
Yeah, throw up a post and just
Put
say,
some out
or
there
leave
and
questions in the
see.
comments
Yeah, because
if you have any
I'm
questions.
really interested. I'm looking forward to talking with him. You know, we are business partners. And it's on the t-shirt side of things with Joe from Obvious Shirts, and but it's been, again, it's been a really cool thing because, you know, and listen, there are plenty of times when people get it wrong, myself included. I know it's hard to believe, but when you can kind of look at somebody and like identify, man, I think this guy's really going to do something. I really like what I'm seeing, and then to watch that continue, you know, as I've noted before,
At every level. I
seeing
mean,
him
it's
at Double A,
just,
but yeah, it just kept going, and now you're like, and then to see how it's really like, it's cool that his status is like, it's beyond just, you know, Cubs prospect heads, right? Like, people on a national level, like a lot of people are showing up to watch him hit, and you know, the Mash Mervis nickname has really kind of taken off, and they're, you know, people on a national scale. And my brother was
there
like, I was
hasn't,
listening to fantasy baseball podcast, and they were calling it Mash Mervis, saying fans were wearing these shirts, and I was
nice.
like, hell yeah, man.
And there hasn't been this much buzz around. I mean, PCA, there's definitely this much buzz, but around a prospect that is this close to being in the big league since Chris Bryant, there hasn't been this much production
Yeah,
from a prospect since Chris Bryant. And the difference between Chris Bryant and Matt Mervis, and why it feels like you're like kind of pulling a tooth to get Mervis up to the big leagues versus Chris Bryant, he was prodigious, right? I mean, like, Chris Bryant was great always, right? He was great at every level. He was winning awards, MVP awards at every level. So it was like, oh yeah, of course he's going to be at the big leagues. Matt Mervis wasn't always that way, right? Like, he was
yeah,
undrafted, right? And so it's not like he's this guy who like everybody expected to be like this super. But if he had been, there'd be no doubt he'd be
right.
at in Chicago. And so we wouldn't be having to have the conversation about, you know, whether he gets up to Chicago and what more he needs to do, because it would just be a no-brainer. It is a
Yeah, and I think,
no-brainer.
yeah, like you said, I mean, Bryant was, you know, the number 2 draft pick, and really only fell that way because, you know, the Astros drafted Mark Appel. But yeah, Bryant had been, you know, great high school player, college player of the year, set home run records in college, minor league player of the year, everything. And so it was like, and even he, you know, it was like, man, why isn't he up earlier? And like you said, you know, undrafted, had there been a draft, Mervis more than likely would have been a 6th round guy. He was hurt by the fact that he was a college senior, so he had no leverage at all over any of it. So he may have fallen a little bit further because teams can kind of skimp you on the draft bonus as it was. I think he only got 20 grand because undrafted free agents, that's their cap. So they really got screwed that season,
Yeah,
because it's only the 5 years. So
crazy.
that part stuff. So, you know, I think like he deserves it so he can get a payday that he never got to as an undrafted free agent. But
And
I
he's
just,
still, you know, it's
yeah,
not that big of a payday at the end of the
right.
day. Still,
Well,
but
no,
more
and
than it's not anything to.
no, and I think what people also need to realize, this dude's 24 years old, right? He played 4 years of college. This is his 2nd year in the minors, right? So he's got a lot of experience. It's not as if he's some high school guy who's only been in the minors for 2 years. He's, you know, 19 or 20,
Yeah,
trying to come up. Like, he's you know, he had to put a little more polish on it because of being the two-way player. But it's, you know, I think a lot of times people don't look at the context of all this stuff. Like, that's not uncommon at all for someone who had several years of college experience to be able to move through the minors quite a bit more quickly, because at the early ages, at those low levels, and he had a rough season again because mentally he was in his head too much, but he's as old as or older than the average at the lowest levels of the minors. Then you start moving up through. Now you're facing some more seasoned guys, and I think, you know, his plate approach and everything else is one that's going to aid him as he moves forward. He's shown that he can hit lefties. That's another thing we've seen. So anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to talk with him, have him on the show, have some people get some more access to that, because it is really neat to see not only how that's taken off, but, you know, just how he has at each level, and as that notoriety has increased, he's upped his game, right? That to me speaks volumes, not just about moving up a level, period, and facing different talent and doing well, but getting more of those interview requests, having your name in the headlines more often, have more people talking to you and about you and all that stuff, and to still then be able to go out and perform at a higher and higher level. That speaks as much to me about the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he'll be 25 before basically as the season starts. He turns 25 in April, and so yeah, it's kind of seems like he's at that age where he'd be ready to go, ripe and ready to go. A lot of things happening around the league and with the Cubs. A lot of guys opting out, and Drew Smiley just opted out, and Wilson Contreras declined his qualifying offer.
Well, not
And so
officially yet. He's going to get one. He's going to decline it. He has not officially declined it yet.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the weight would be there, but
I don't think there's any doubt that that's going to happen. But
yeah,
he's done.
So yeah,
Smiley might be back. But,
yeah. So a lot of kind of moving pieces there that it's, we'll get some clarity on it here. Well, okay. So the QOs have to be, when is the deadline on that? Is that
by
the 15th?
Tomorrow? No, by tomorrow.
Is it tomorrow?
Yeah. It's same as the 5, because there's a 5-day moratorium on negotiations with other teams. So there's from, November, what was it, November 5th or whatever, 6th, that free agency officially began. And then they have until the 10th. The deadline is at what, I don't know if it's like 4 p.m., 6 p.m. I forget what the actual time is on the deadline. On the 10th is when they have to have any decisions by the team or the player on options, by the team on putting a qualifying offer on a player, and then the players have until the 20th to decide whether or not to accept or decline the qualifying offer. Most of those, I'm sure, are going to be happening pretty quickly. There are some guys who might have to sit and wait on it, depending on how many are out there. And in the meantime, then the 15th is the deadline where teams have to set their 40-man rosters, which is wild because it used to be like December 2nd, 3rd. It was, a few days before the Rule 5 draft. Now it's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the Rule 5 draft. Yeah. So that's wild to me that they pushed up that deadline. I think the 18th is the non-tender deadline. I believe.
So will we see with the Cubs and their 40-man moves, will we see them start making moves before the 15th, or will it all come down right around the 15th?
I mean, I think they could make some, because they've got, that 5 to 6 days or whatever, depending on, again, where the time falls, that they may start. That's when you'll see some of those trades, because it's like, okay, if we have some of these guys we can't protect, we're going to try to go ahead and move them rather than have them lost in a trade. So I could see that. But again, if there's somebody that because you're doing that, but then because of the roster crunch, right? You're making that move with a team that probably has more spots, but then you'd be taking on someone who is not going to be eligible. I mean, unless you're trading multiples of them for like one main starter type player, that you could slide in there. So I think there'll be some low level moves. I think for the most part, the Cubs will probably hope that a lot of their guys can pass through. But they got a ton of guys eligible. That's the only problem. And then there's a non-tender. So that I can see the Cubs making some moves there on players who have gotten non-tendered by their teams. Maybe that's Cody Bellinger, right? I don't think there's any way in hell the Dodgers pay that dude the $18 million or so that he's projected to get in arbitration. Mm-hmm. Do they try to, let him clear through all that and pick him up on some kind of a deal? I don't know. So yeah, I think between tomorrow and the 20th, there's going to be a lot of activity on those, like teams looking for extreme value, right? In Rule 5 eligible trades and guys who have been non-tendered. I think that's most of the activity. We'll see some of that. And then after the 20th is when we know for certain what the value is of everyone, because if they decline that if they accept the qualifying offer, they're off the market. It doesn't matter. And if they decline it, then we know for sure who's on the market, what's attached to them in terms of the penalties. And then that's when I think the actual, the real kind of big bidding can start to take off.
So if the Cubs trade guys that are Rule 5 eligible and they go to their team, that team, in order to keep them, has to put them on the 40-man, right?
Yep. Yeah, they'd have to protect them still. And so I think, and I don't know how many of those guys. I mean, they have so many. I mean, there's some no-brainers, right?
I'm looking at the list
unless they swing a trade for, unless they try to move Ben Brown or somebody like that. But I mean, you've got Wisniewski and Brown. Wisniewski's obviously he's
Ball,
already
Hunter
been he's
Big,
already been protected. Brown, yeah. See,
Hunter
like
Biggie,
Ball,
Bryce Ball,
I could see him being a guy that
Correa,
gets moved somehow. You know,
Giovanni Cruz, Davis, obviously, Luis Devers.
Devers will be. I got to think he'll be protected.
Darius Hill,
Danny's Correa is another
Brian
one.
Jensen.
Jensen. See, there's a bunch. There are a ton of pitchers on there, and I just would like. There's no way they can protect all of them.
Brennan
And
Little.
I think Danny's Correa and Brennan Little. Some of those are guys who I could see a team picking up on a Rule 5
for
pitch.
sure.
You know, because if you're looking for pitching, I mean, Correa is a guy who throws triple digits with the fastball, wipeout slider. I was super impressed watching him at Iowa. That is absolutely a dude who I could see getting picked off in the Rule 5. And it's somebody who I could see the Cubs wanting to call up and work with, although they might look at it and say, look, we've got a ton of relievers and guys that we can pack into that bullpen. So we're going to just – but I wonder if there are some little deals to be made in there that they could, you know, kind of do that without having to lose them for nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be very interesting. And in fact, what the 15th is Wednesday, right? Is that next Wednesday?
Yeah, what's today? Is. Today's the 8th, yeah. Yep. Today's the 9th. Next Tuesday.
I don't know. Next Tuesday. So, yeah, so we will circle back. Obviously, we'll have a show on Wednesday, and we'll be able to break all of this down for you guys. And so that should be a fun and interesting show. But I think that about does it for this week.
Does something.
We're gonna have a lot to talk about over the next few weeks. That's for sure. Basically the entire off season. So be sure to join us all off season as things develop with the Cubs and they make moves and they sign players and this Rule 5 draft coming up. It's going to be a lot of excitement. So we'll keep you guys informed either here or follow us at cubsinsider.com. And that's about it. Until next week, we'll see you.
See ya.